The people we support in individualised arrangements fall into two categories. Firstly, individuals and families who have made a conscious decision that they want to support their family member get a good life rather than a professional service. They seek support grounded in relationship rather than in a professional transaction. Their ambition and vision for their family member is more explicit and higher than just wanting a good service. Their orientation to risk and to working collaboratively is of a higher order. Second category, whom we support in individualised arrangements, are people who have been failed utterly by conventional services. People who have ended up in distress and danger. People for whom the stakes could not be higher. Ultimately, where we, the service provider, took the view that we have no option but to work with this person in a radically personalised way. We have to take the lead from the individual. Some of these 65 arrangements are funded with support packages that match the funding associated with the individual. Some cost more, some a lot more than the funding associated with the individual, and some cost less. As a population, what's noteworthy about these 65 is that the costs associated with them fluctuate much more dynamically than the costs associated with people we support in traditional group programs. Often they start at a higher level than the level at which they subsequently settle. And from time to time, they can increase for a phase and then reduce. In traditional services, our experience is that costs are more fixed. Generally, they start high and hold at a high level. And if there is any change in the cost base, it's generally only in one direction, higher. My working assumption is that there is significantly more waste in the group-based traditional approach. And I believe that this more dynamic trajectory of costs clearly has implications for resource allocation models in a system of personalised budgets. So this brief outline of our experience of individualised services I present to you for the sole purpose of underscoring its feasibility. After the first 18 months, it's not particularly difficult to do. The problem in the first 18 months is stopping ourselves from reacting on the basis of old reflexes and default settings and failing to see the issues clearly and directly. And it is feasible for individuals at all points on the spectrum. Some of the people we support who have the most intensive support needs are supported in this way. I was chatting to a colleague yesterday about doing this presentation, and I asked him for some comments. And his opening comment was, well, Brendan, money is power. And this is a sentiment often used to project the importance of personalised budgets. And there is a truth to it. But of more consequence by far is the power to frame the consumer mindset and shape consumer demand and determine what the consumer asks of the system. The vast majority of families want from the system what the system has groomed them to believe they need. It should not register as a surprise that families internalize as automatic assumptions those beliefs that the system has been promoting with them for decades. It takes untypical levels of curiosity and independent inquiry to unlatch oneself from the loop of closed circuit reasoning that people's special needs should out-trump their general needs as human beings, and that these special needs, which are paramount and properly overriding of other needs, require special services which can only be properly delivered by credentialed professionals, and that good services will automatically deliver the kind of good life we each hunger for. Those of us who end up hooked by these self-evident views of what is needed generally need expert help to remove these conditioned cataracts from our eyes and to access the I can see clearly now insights that the proper point of departure is what does a good life mean or look like for you, and what set of assumptions, opportunities and relationships can help you access this good life, and how do we activate, nurture and sustain these capacities. At this point I should acknowledge that when we were looking for expert help in Marisa for cataract removal, we had the good fortune to hit upon the wry deadpan brand of subversion which Michael Kendrick has shared with you this morning. The delivery of personalised budgets will be a hollow achievement if all it buys are the old packages that keep people passive and on the margins of community and society. As almost each speaker has stated here this morning, vision is more fundamental than mode of funding. Some providers are very low in vision. Likewise, some families are low in vision. Ultimately, vision is the game changer, not the modality of funding. A particular jeopardy to vision, which we have revived in the last 10 years in Ireland via the Disability Act and its outworkings, and our current Children's Network disability teams, is to reinstate and reinforce the view that the proper response to being different and requiring effective support is therapy in all its guises and manifestations. We have presumably, hopefully inadvertently, restored a clinic-based, medical-type model and are grooming a new generation of families to quest for the redemptive holy grail of access to intensive regimes of therapy. This is not to dismiss the value and importance of good professional intervention and support, but rather to caution against viewing as central and determinative what is ultimately incidental and complementary. The disability service system, by that I mean the state system and the provider sector, is likely to resist a move to personalised budgets. We had an experience within my own sector about 2 or 3 years ago where Inclusion Ireland sought a commitment from providers to kind of commit to allocate, I think it was 3 or 5%, Paddy, I can't remember the figure, of overall funding to individualised arrangements. Now people weren't up for that. The resistance won't be evident at the level of rhetoric. People will embrace the principles and the desired outcomes. Resistance will be more subtle. It will be evident in the exhortations to, we really have to get this right. It's got to be as perfect or as near perfect as we can get it before we run with it. The advance to personalised budgets will be challenged to meet design and evidence standards, proof of concept standards, higher than what underpins the status quo. Resistance may also be evident in attempts to limit personalised budgets in terms of scale and momentum. Death by pilot may be a strategy, or capping the amount of money that can be allocated to any individual. School leaver funding is likely to be the low-hanging fruit in this regard, which generally deals in amounts of funding from 11,000 to 40,000. Real seriousness of intent would be evident if funding for residential supports, especially full-time residential supports, could be accessed via personalised budgets. In the case of people with intellectual disability, we're talking here about funding in the range 80,000 to 110,000 and higher. I want to close now with some comments about governance and regulation, because this is another challenge and possible jeopardy. And Christy made the comment earlier this morning about the need for governance to be proportionate. Governance and regulation of personalised budgets will be a particular challenge. Clearly, oversight, accountability and governance are design challenges that need to be addressed. The appropriateness, relevance and adequacy of the arrangements for the individual need to be the subject of explicit and fit-for-purpose oversight. I underline fit-for-purpose oversight. Likewise, the appropriateness and cost-effectiveness of the use of public funding needs to be the subject of fit-for-purpose oversight. The reaction against the charity scandals, if we may call them that, of recent years has been to invest in generating a compliance industry. For instance, we now have a most energetic compliance unit in HSE. We didn't have that 4 years ago. And the compliance unit in HSE, which is manned by very serious public servants, thinks it's done a poor year's work if it hasn't generated additional compliance requirements year on year. Voluntary boards are presumed to add value primarily through having a preoccupation with procedural compliance, compliance with pay policy, procurement, internal audit. This has now reached a point where I saw an ad in the Irish Times a few weeks ago for, I think it was the Rehab Group, looking for new prospective board members. And at the very end they said, as a guide, you will need to think of allocating 20 days per year. 20 days per year, that's a full working month, to cope with compliance. We recently had a governance audit by the reputable Deloitte. Mercifully, it wasn't Goldman Sachs. And they were very diligent and they wanted to know about our procurement policy and they wanted to know about whether we complied with public sector pay policy and they wanted to know about the various audit functions we had. And at one point I said to them, do you want to check out how we're doing in terms of delivering Department of Health and HSE policy objectives? The answer was, no, we don't really need to bother about that. So do you want to look at our strategic objectives? Do you have strategic objectives? Yes, that's good. We don't need to look at them. So that's the version of compliance we've got. And this brings us back to the core question of what value is being added and to whom by this paradigm of governance. Is it to the individual with disability and his or her family, or is it to protect the service system against hostile inquiry by Prime Time or the Public Accounts Committee? Scandals such as we've seen generally flow from flagrant disregard of 3 or 4 key principles of trust and integrity. Typically, they don't flow from disregard of the most recent 20 to 30 additional new compliance requirements. Oversight needs to get back to basics and not become a standalone silo which develops its own institutional needs and which ends up draining value rather than adding value. If this compliance juggernaut is let loose on personalised budgets, it will flatten them before they get off the ground. Governance and regulation are not primary public virtues. We don't allocate public money primarily to put in place spheres of regulated activity. We allocate public monies to support people to get the lives they want for themselves, to express solidarity with families, to promote a vision of society that values diversity and inclusion. Our approach to oversight and accountability needs to retain its focus on these primary objectives. And this involves sophisticated, in-depth overview of how resources are being used by people who know how they should be used. Unfortunately, when it comes to governance and oversight, we are inclined to opt for the easier option of taking our eyes off outcomes onto specifying what processes should be put in place and then auditing whether we are compliant with these processes. The appetite to specify a process has particular relevance for personalised budgets, in that bureaucratic systems love to define standardised ways of going about things. Bureaucrats are tidy-minded people. And when they define these standardised ways of doing things, these are the only ways of doing things that are legitimised. We need to develop an approach to accountability and oversight that gives people the scope to pursue value in non-orthodox, innovative ways. And we need people who have responsibility for governance, who can discern and validate value being delivered in non-orthodox, non-standardized ways. Thank you.